So here, I guess we're kind of getting the time frame, right? So this is where he started out. This was some kind of early intermediate point. And you can see that maybe he's just growing out his hair a bit more. So let's move on to the next photo. So this is an amazing side-by-side, right? And again, over here, right, what do you see? You don't see any recipient sites in the crown area at all, right? It's mostly just midsection and hairline, like he said, to kind of, add density and thickness. Hello everyone and welcome back to yet another video. Today we're back looking at hair loss progress pictures on the tressless hair loss subreddit, the most popular hair loss community on Reddit and maybe online. Today we're looking at the user Habit Traditional 4864, kind of an interesting name, and we're going to be looking at the progress that they made on their hair loss stack between November 2024 to now, at the time of recording this video, and at the time of the post, April 19th, 2025. So let's read the post. The post is titled, quote, Crown Recovery, November 2024 to now. Crazy. They write, quote, 29 years old, liposomal topical finasteride, Minoxidil, respectively 0.3% and 8% once daily. Low-level laser therapy, or LLLT, helmet, 25 minutes every other day. Daily vitamins listed below. So, they use something called New Medica B Replete, Dr. Berg, D3 and K2, Kirkman Biotin, Jarl's Formulas, Zinc Balance, Metagenics, Adrest. Okay, so I guess those are just like vitamin brands. He also goes on to say that, quote, I used to take oral finasteride 1 milligram daily several years ago and had heavy sexual sides. I have no sides at all from this liposomal topical finasteride. I am very active and eat healthy. Really glad I decided to try again and trust the process. I am once again happy to answer any questions you may have. Now, before we look at the pictures, guys, this is interesting, right? They're using liposomal topical finasteride and minoxidil, respectively, at 0.3%, so the topical finasteride being at 0.3%, and the minoxidil being 8%, and he's doing this both daily, right? What I find interesting is that, at least typically from what I see, topical finasteride is administered at 0.1% up to 0.25%, right? But it's argued that it already goes systemic anyway. But for some people who deal with sexual side effects, and if they're dealing with heavy sexual side effects, maybe using it topically could be beneficial for them, right? And maybe they're not getting as much systemic absorption with their once daily use, but also perhaps they're mostly focusing that DHT suppression locally in the tissue. Now, there's a lot of debate in the literature on how much topical finasteride is going to reduce scalp DHT buy, or the intrafollicular DHT buy. I'm not going to get into that. There's some studies that say, oh, it's like 70%, but I do suspect it to still be around, or maybe a little bit less than the typical 35 to 40% range, probably coming in at around, if I had to just guess based on all the literature that I've read, maybe ballparking in that 30% kind of range. But that's just speculation. But it seems for this particular user that he got some pretty good progress. So let's look at what happened. So I'm assuming this is the starting point, right? You can see that their crown is very, very diffuse. However, this is the after, right? Obviously, hopefully this would be the after. And you can see that the crown has thickened up a bit. So let's move on to the next image in the gallery. So here, I guess we're kind of getting the time frame, right? So this is where he started out. This was some kind of early intermediate point. And you can see that maybe he's just growing out his hair a bit more, right? But at the same time, you can see like the area is kind of filling out a bit, right? It's kind of filling out a bit. And over here, the crown, the hair has grown, right? But the crown, even though it's diffuse, it looks like it's picking up some density aside from just hair length. And finally, in the final panel on the bottom right, the crown doesn't even look like it had any issues. Let's move on to the next image in the gallery. So this is an amazing side-by-side, right? One thing that I do want to point out though, right? Just looking at this image real quick, it seems like he has a hair transplant scar, right? And that's not to imply that, he had a hair transplant and he had the hairs put in his crown. That very well could have been from the liposomal topical finasteride and minoxidil combo, right? But, he didn't, at least from what I read, he didn't state that he had a hair transplant. So, and I'm only saying this because some people might say, oh, well, it looks like he has a hair transplant scar. How do we know that he just didn't get a hair transplant and they put a bunch of hairs in that area? I mean, I don't see any recipient, sites in the crown area at all, right? And the crown looks pretty natural when it's grown out. So I don't know. I don't think he got a transplant, at least put into the crown. Again, the before and after, the side by side, is night and day. And once again, we get a better time frame here, right? You have his starting point, the early intermediary point, and the final point over here. So brilliant progress that this user made. Let's have a look at the comment section though. Okay, so immediately we're being faced with some criticisms, right? Somebody said OP had a hair transplant, and it's so obvious though, like even from this photo over here, right? You can see, let me see if I can open it up in a different tab so we have a better idea. You can see where he had, a hair transplant, right? You can see this. So if we just focus in on this screenshot that I just took, right? You can see the FUT scar in this approximate area. Yeah, you can see the FUT scar over here that he had. So, it looks like people are stating that there's some deception here. I don't know if there's some deception, though. Again, I do think the crown probably recovered on its own. I don't think he had a transplant in the crown, but let's see what they say in the comments. So, Medium Grand 8182 responds, OP had a hair transplant, and it looks like he went through OP's post history. If you're ever skeptical about anyone and their claims, look at their post history, right? Sometimes it's pretty telling. So we're looking at the user Habit Traditional 4864. And it looks like he was responding on a different thread. So he says this, I'm confused. You just replied to someone else saying your clinic said to remove them at day 7. Another OP from a different thread on the hair transplant subreddit responds to our guy that had this progress. He says, yes, what's the confusion? Clinic told me to remove them yesterday on day 7, but I was too afraid to scrub them off the way they told me to. And I read people saying that I should touch after 2 weeks. Then how is scrubbing allowed on day 7? And then the OP, our OP from the other subreddit, Trustless, responds, gentle rubbing is the way you're supposed to remove them. Like I said, my clinic told me to start at day 10. All of them came off that day, blah, 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 yada, yada, yada. So it looks like they caught him on the hair transplant subreddit, right? And people are also noting that he had 2 hair transplants, right? They find out that he said, this is my second hair transplant. The frontal area is transplanted hair. I'm on meds. Okay, so let's be fair here, right? I'm actively, reacting to this, so I'm kind of discovering this with you guys. Maybe he got a hair transplant in his midsection and, and to make a hairline, right? That doesn't mean he had a hair transplant in his crown, but maybe the super sleuths, the investigators on Trustless may uncover that to be the case. So OP responds, he clarifies over here. He says, edit, I've added pics of both hairline procedures to the original post thread for proof, and I'll also attach them here. So it looks like, let's see what our OP said, Habit Traditional. So the OP has responded to a user that's now deleted. The user said, I was about to say, I see a line on the back of your scalp, so you did get a transplant. Our OP, Habit Traditional 4864, says, quote, on the front, yes, I had a shitty FUT procedure done on my hairline years ago. I had a second procedure done overseas in January with the DHI method to correct and add density to the front area and to fill in my old FUT scar that you see in my before pics. To be clear, there have been no grafts placed in the area shown at any point whatsoever. What is shown is purely from recovery protocol. So, he did clarify here pretty conclusively. And you can see over here, he shared some pictures in the thread. So this is, of course, like I speculated, this is his hairline. He had a midsection, touch up. And he also shows the date too, right? 2019. So day 1 of that transplant, or after the transplant, right? And this is from, I'm assuming this is the second transplant, January 25th. We don't know what year that is. I'm assuming maybe it was this year. I don't know. But clearly it looks like he was filling in the midsection again and the hairline, right? And if we were to notice that he had a hair transplant in his crown, you would see the recipient sites being marked here, right? Let's have a closer look real quick. And as you can see, we don't see any recipient sites over here. We only see it in the midsection and the hairline. And, maybe a bit of extractions from the parietal lobe, right? So it looks like he is vindicated, right? So all in all, what I have to say is I appreciate the OP for sharing, right? People are saying that he's, being misleading. Sometimes people can have a witch hunt on these subreddits because they're jealous, but I do believe the OP had legitimate results, and these aren't from a hair transplant. And I mean, just have a closer look, right? Where are the recipient sites? I don't see any. Now you could argue, well, maybe he had the transplant, 5 months ago and the site recovered and now the hair is sparse. But even so, like, the development of the crown area looks pretty perfect. Damn near perfect, right? So, I mean, maybe he had a good transplant. But I would argue, especially based on the pictures that he showed us, that these are legitimate progress photos, right? And I think the photo that kind of makes this case in point are the collection of his first hair transplant picture, where you can see the midsection and the hairline being touched up from 2019, and also the most recent hair transplant procedure. I'm assuming, again, this is January 2025, January 25th, 2025. And again, over here, right, what do you see? You don't see any recipient sites in the crown area at all, right? It's mostly just midsection and hairline, like he said, to kind of, add density and thicken it up a bit. So yeah, all in all, excellent recovery for this poster, Habit Traditional 4864. And guys, you can have a similar result too, right? Even the people who are complaining about sexual side effects, you can still be proactive and go about doing your treatment, right? All you have to do is maybe consider using a topical version of finasteride, whether it's just plain old topical finasteride, or maybe something like this OP did, liposomal topical finasteride with minoxidil at these respective concentrations. Of course, find what works for you. What you have to keep in mind is you have to continue these treatments if you want to keep your hair. This isn't a cure, right? There are some people that say, oh, once you stop, then you'll lose your hair. Well, of course, once you stop going to the gym, you lose your muscle mass, right? We don't have a cure now. We don't have a cure yet. So what we have is pretty much damn near good as a cure, right? And he found something that can work for him, considering that he had sexual side effects on the oral finasteride. Anyway, guys, if you want any help when it comes to hair transplants or just addressing your hair loss, I do consultations, links in the description. There we can come up with a hair loss stack that you can take to your doctor and talk about, but also we can go over to the hair loss literature to the best of my knowledge, and I can help, streamline you through and help you out with your hair loss recovery. So all in all, thanks for watching this video, and I hope to see you in the next one. Peace out. And just for the sake of the video, let's get another look at, that before and after. Look at this contrast. Wow. Look at this. Just such a good improvement in the crown area. And I know he's happy, so this is day and night. Anyway, thanks for watching, guys, and see you in the next one. Peace.